We're back here on the desk, and it was reported by Mark Raimondi on Tuesday evening that Brock Lesnar has notified the UFC of his latest retirement from mixed martial arts, and he has been removed from the USADA testing pool because after his fight at UFC 200 and his failed drug test for clomiphene, he was still eligible to be tested by USADA throughout this entire period. So it's interesting the fact that he didn't instantly remove himself from that pool. I don't think anyone wants those 6 a.m. knocks on their door if there isn't some reason behind it, but he has now cut that off. So if he ever does choose to return, which he does have his WWE contract for another year, should he choose to return to the UFC, he would then have to go through that 4-month testing pool. And I don't think anyone's writing off the idea that Brock doesn't fight again.
Exactly. And if that's the case, then why did you... I mean, it's one of those
Randy Couture retired a bunch of times. BJ Penn retired a bunch of times.
But those guys didn't have to deal with the
But this is creating an
fact.
obstacle now for his return. Unlike Randy Couture and others, they didn't have to enter this 4-month pool. So you're going to delay your return if you make that decision.
True, but you can do all the juice in the world in the meantime if you want. Pollock, you tell me, how tight really, genuinely, as somebody who's inside, how tight is the WWE drug testing compared to USADA?
He's not subjected to it. He's not a full-time performer, so he's not subjected to it.
So nobody will test this guy?
He won't be tested.
Oh. So you watch most of these, the wrestling events, the shows. If you were to notice that he was way bigger with way more striations and vascularity and all that kind of stuff in 6 months, would you just think he was working out harder? Or would you think perhaps that this was a good time to gas up like crazy, and then if you choose to fight again, we'll deal with that 4 months at the end of gassing up like crazy? I mean, of course, this is locker room conversation I'm having right now. This is not expertise sitting up at a desk of highly intelligent, because but this is the locker room conversation that everybody's having right now. That's my point, is we say the guy is retired, and then immediately the only thing we're comfortable, he's no longer going to be USADA tested. I mean, that thing, we can't pretend that we don't all think that's connected.
The reality is, Brock just laughs at the whole industry. He laughs because whether he did what he did in this fight with Mark Hunt, Mark Hunt's angry, he gets out of this kind of scot-free, has his deal with the UFC. He's still one of the biggest stars in the world, so he gets to do whatever the fuck he wants at all times. All these promotions need Brock Lesnar more than Brock Lesnar needs
It's also important to be careful, too, because there's no one that, to me, gets scrutinized by the eye test more than this guy.
Yeah.
And
he's 39.
To me, he doesn't care. Listen,
how old is he?
Listen, he's 39. Yeah. He'll be 40 this July. So it's easy to look at this guy and make all of these conclusions, and I think a lot of people run with the soundbite of Mark Hunt stating this guy was on steroids, when in fact his 2 failed drug tests were not technically for steroids, and it's an important distinction that not many people make. Now, you can be naive as well. I mean, you can look at this guy, but you can only go with concrete facts, and I think that is important here.
But is that true?
Why would he want to be subjected to random drug testing for this next year and have that inconvenience? Maybe he doesn't have a desire to fight again. Maybe he's looking at one more contract in wrestling. Maybe he's not even looking at that. He's 40 next year. He can retire if he wants.
But couldn't he have retired years ago?
Well, maybe.
It's not as if the guy lives in Manhattan, has a condo here and condo. He lives out in the woods.
Yeah,
he shoots deers. This is what this guy does. He lives a completely simple life. So if he wants to retire on the money that he and Sable have made over their lifetime, I think they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
So the fact.
But it's fun to get in and do these things, throw guys through the air while everybody cheers.
And as much as we look at his affiliation to professional wrestling, it just feels that he is a real competitor in the sense he comes from a collegiate wrestling background, and he was the UFC heavyweight champion of the world. Alistair Overeem smashed in his guts. For him to want to get back in there really shows you what type of competitor you're dealing with.
If you go back to that post-fight press conference right after the Mark Hunt fight, you have never seen this guy more happy.
Exactly.
You could tell it was the time of his life, and it was a competitive edge that he hadn't been able to itch for years at that point. That press conference, it completely sounded like he wanted to fight again. That was before we got the knowledge of both the test that was taken prior to UFC 200, where the results didn't come out till after, and then his fight night drug test.
Yeah.
So
so you failed drug tests, okay? So when Cyborg fails drug tests or any of these, Barnett,
Mir,
Vitor, there's a lot of them.
We can just list them.
I'm with you. Misinformation and just going with what feels right. That isn't, that's got a negative effect on us. I mean, on society. So I take your point, Pollock. It's not the right thing to do. However, at the same time, having said that, I can tell you that 39-year-olds do not become bigger and stronger and leaner. It is just not doesn't medically happen. So if you do happen to observe this, you can extrapolate that there are possible things happening. But hey man, the guy, and John, to your point, this is an elite athlete, a wild human being, a wild and interesting character that we have had the pleasure of watching do all kinds of incredible things. When he doesn't need to do them, he does them for enjoyment. The downside is Mark Hunt is also a spectacular athlete, a spectacular martial artist, and an incredible human being that has entertained us like crazy. And that guy took a beating from a guy who was on things that they are not supposed to be on.
But your point, yes, we were talking about it yesterday. We know the landscapes. We know that you can get poked in the face, and you get hit in the balls, and you can grab the fence. Yeah. Everybody knows these things, just like everybody knows that. We heard George say, if you watch The Hurt Business, George St. Pierre believes that up to 90% of the industry is using steroids. Well, you know that.
I'm with you. When you make jokes about the fact that Brock Lesnar is probably on steroids before you signed to fight him for $500,000, then it turns out that he was. There is some of that. We do have to be responsible for our choices. When you really think that the guy you're fighting is on the juice and it turns out to be true, didn't you already think that? So, but complex man. These are all complex ideas. We have a real knee-jerk reaction to just one piece of information, and now we know the whole picture. But these are complicated people and complicated stories. Brock Lesnar has done some incredible things. That guy was like you said, the UFC heavyweight champion of the world. He beat Randy Couture. That is amazing, and he's really been something special to watch. If he never fights again at 40, that's probably safest for him and for some other people possibly. An interesting guy, and he's going to be interesting to look back over time and see his impact.
All right, that's going to wrap it up following the news of Brock Lesnar informing the UFC of his second retirement from mixed martial arts.